Hello and welcome to this week's What Were They Thinking? First is the decision by Brazil's government to reduce university funding by 30% in response to student activism. Education officials in Brazil have received many complaints about partisan activities on campus. They have taken the rather practical stance that if students are being funded to attend university, and they are instead taking time out to protest events rather than be educated, then clearly they do not need the funding. This is further compounded by poor performance and a need on the government's part to further reduce the budget deficit, which they are doing by reducing funding in a number of areas such as education. The accusations made in turn are the government has taken an anti-Marxist position, with claims that the government views universities as communist strongholds. President Bolsonaro recently took to Twitter, stating that the funding for sociology and philosophy would be targeted in particular. At least in part, it is because the government views these areas of education as failing to produce graduates who are employable, productive members of society. Assuming the secondary purpose of a university is not just to educate, but to conduct research, a lot of interest has been put on findings that a sense of smell is linked to a longer life. At least that is the case according to one piece of research that has found the better you can smell things, the longer you will live. To simplify the study, it was conducted over 13 years with just under 2,300 participants. They were supposed to identify 12 common smells, and they were awarded a point for each one they got correct, up to 12 possible points. They were all healthy and able to conduct their lives independently of any other support. In the 13 years of the study, 1,211 died. Those who had low scores were 46% more likely to die by year 10 and 30% more by year 13. The NHS has responded to the media attention this study has received, and in particular, the claims that there is a prospective smell test for dementia coming soon, by stating very clearly that no, this is preliminary, that whilst the evidence does appear to support a correlation between brain degenerative disorders, sense of smell, and early death, there is no definitive or substantive proof outside of this at the moment. Far more definitive and somewhat interesting is the Hirondella gigas amphipod. This is a small crustacean that lives in the Challenger Deep, a ravine in the ocean. The gigas usually consume aluminium in the form of sediment from the ocean floor. These aluminium ions combine with a number of other chemicals in the gut, and this forms aluminium hydroxide gel, which is used as a protective mechanism for the pressure of the deep. This is done by expelling the aluminium hydroxide gel into the seawater, where it reacts and forms a solid surface to protect it, a sort of armor if you will. This adaptation has been proven necessary in this particular part of the Mariana Trench. It has a pressure about 1,000 times greater than that at normal ground level. Having now examined a weird and interesting new creature, we can explore the bizarre conspiracy theory about a whale wearing a harness that it appears some of the authorities suspect is a Russian spy. Now the Trump-Russia collusion hysteria is over, suppose they're looking for a new way to blame Russia for something. This bizarre and unexpected beluga whale with a small harness on it fits the bill quite nicely. When marine biologists from Norway's Directorate of Fisheries were able to lure the whale towards a boat and remove the harness, they found that it had the words "Equipment of St. Petersburg" printed on the inside. The harness itself is designed in such a way that you could mount an action camera on it. Academics have been claiming that nobody involved in a university from either Russia or Norway would put such a harness on a whale, and therefore it must be a Russian military asset. Russia has a naval base, and a rather substantial one, located in Murmansk. If this is beginning to sound strangely familiar, you might remember one of two things. Either Senator Mike Lee criticizing the Green New Deal using just such a line of reasoning.
Now, I'm the first to admit that a massive fleet of giant, highly trained seahorses would be cool. It would be really, really awesome. Mr. President, we must not allow and cannot tolerate a giant seahorse gap.
Or that Red Alert 2 used dolphins and large squid as units within the game for naval supremacy. There are supposedly reports coming out of Russia that says that this theory may not be entirely out of reach. Whilst this has been entertaining and become something of a meme, the Beluga whale is causing problems as it will not leave the Norwegian port in which it appears to have occupied. This is unlike the normal behavior for the species, who are normally solitary, or at least do not actively seek out humans. This is unlike the next story, in which a boy has almost lost his hearing due to a parasite in his eardrum. Only in America would a 9-year-old present to doctors reporting a strange sound in his ear, only to find that it was a tick. A tick is a small blood-sucking parasite, similar in its behavior to leeches or lice. In order to remove this one, using fine implements and a surgical microscope was not enough, as it could have damaged his hearing permanently. The doctors had to put him to sleep, and he had to undergo surgery to remove it. Fortunately, he appears to have recovered with full hearing and no other complications. Although you might expect to see something unusual and bizarre in America, as is usual for Australia, it's simply another day where they found a three-eyed snake. Rangers for the state of the Northern Territory were called out to a small town called Humpty Doo, where they found the three-eyed carpet python. These are 3 fully functioning eyes. Unlike most instances of an extra eye, this was not one where 2 heads should have been formed and have fused together. Rather, it is a third, fully functioning and properly intact eye socket. Despite all the advantages you think this might impart, the snake that was named Monty died last week, going from the definitively existing to the bizarre and unexpected. The Indian Army claims to have found yeti footprints. A mountaineering detachment stumbled upon what they call a set of mysterious footprints in Nepal. The report from the mountaineering division, which is real, claims to have found footprints measuring 80 by 40 centimeters, close to the Makalu base camp. In proper internet fashion, the army posted the report's claims on Twitter, only to have many of their 6 million followers criticize them for it. Perhaps the most obvious of which is that there is footprints from only 1 foot, and many of the criticisms asked, is the animal supposed to travel by jumping? After this had continued for some time, the military states that they passed on the information to subject matter experts, but that they had shared it as and when they did, in order to spark greater interest by the public, particularly in science. Past research into the area of yeti footprints has generally yielded either a misunderstanding of the evidence or a fake. When it was misunderstood, often those who are traveling in snowshoes will leave elongated footprints that as they melt will get longer and slightly wider, and this has led to the discovery of otherwise very large footprints that would otherwise have been unexplained. But in general, any and all evidence found so far to support the existence of a yeti has been found to be wrong, fake, or misunderstood. There was one study that claimed there was a possible hybrid between polar bears and another obscure mountain bear that has been called into question. Perhaps the scientists looking to create new model organisms for research have taken inspiration from that. Researchers are trying to use the new CRISPR gene editing technology to move away from some of the most common model organisms, such as fruit flies and zebrafish. As a rule, these two have been used as a baseline for nearly all research over the last 40 years. Scientists are trying to create new model organisms almost from scratch. The problem they've found is that they cannot get the organism to live long enough to reproduce. This is rather obviously a substantial setback in the development of any new model organism, but what it's yielding in place of that is substantial knowledge about the life cycle and reproductive habits and requirements of different species. While some scientists are trying to create new things, others are trying to destroy them, such as research into biodegradable bags. The first results from a 3-year study have just been published, and it is indicating that although claiming to be biodegradable, these plastic bags really aren't. To make their point, the researchers were able to bury one of these for 3 years. The bag claims to be biodegradable and compostable, and yet despite that, it is able to have a full load of shopping put in it and function after 3 years. This is true of the bags tested in the soil and in water, but not those open to the air, which appears to be an essential component to these bags breaking down. There are currently researchers who either are producing or have produced technology that creates bags that are relatively biodegradable by comparison. One example is that developed by Donald White and Dr. Michael Curry. Other researchers have been working on things such as a HIV antiviral treatment that has found an almost effectively zero sexual transmission rate. HIV is something that is incredibly easily transmitted from one person to another during intercourse. In fact, any bodily fluid poses some risk. Unfortunately, homosexual men are at greater risk than most, due to the nature of their activities when not using protection. The study involved 750 gay men who were on an antiviral treatment and who did not transmit the virus to their partner whilst having unprotected sex in any of the just over 76,000 reports of unprotected sex in this study. The researchers behind this study are taking the rather aggressive stance that their evidence shows that unprotected sex, if you are HIV positive and on medication, is safe. A more conservative opinion might hold that even if you are on medication and there is a relative safety net, you should still use protection. This is much like the argument that if you are taking the pill which is 99% effective, then you needn't worry about condoms. But if you want to be certain and avoid that 1% trap? Briefly returning to a video from earlier this week, which posited the idea of using obesity to reduce global warming, we go to a new study. There is evidence that obesity results in smaller brains. Researchers looking into obesity found there were implications that went beyond the simple known physiological effects, such as damage to joints, heart, kidney, liver, so on. Their findings serve to cement the association of a shrinking brain and obesity. It involved an MRI analysis of over 12,000 UK adults. The participants had a reduced amount of grey matter, which is the neuron-rich mass responsible for processing and cognitive activity. That is the average implication from this study, but there is a distinction between the effect on men and women. In men, it resulted in lower grey matter volume overall, and particularly affected the thalamus and hippocampus, but not the amygdala. In women, it had a reduced volume in one part of the grey matter, called the globus pallidus, which is associated with voluntary movement. Unfortunately, the researchers don't have a full picture of everyone involved, and they can only speculate on which way the causality goes. Is being obese going to cause brain damage, or does brain damage lead to obesity? The researchers state that more investigation is needed to understand just what is happening and why. The next story sounds like one of those pranks that crop up every now and then, in which an asteroid is going to hit the Earth. Generally speaking, it's shunted off as being just that, a prank. However, there are a number of international organizations who are currently preparing to run a mock asteroid emergency. The European Space Agency is live tweeting a hypothetical asteroid disaster. Adding to this, they are using the 2019 Planetary Defense Conference as a platform for this exercise. And of course, they're doing this only a short time before an actual asteroid that could possibly cause this kind of damage, named Apophis, is coming towards Earth.
Number 9. There won't be time to stop an impact event. On Halloween 2015, a massive, approximately 1,300-foot asteroid, 2015 TB145, which apparently looked like a skull, flew past the Earth at just 1.3 times the distance of the Moon. Even a slight deviation in its course could have been catastrophic.
In theory, there is a group called the International Asteroid Warning Network that should give us advanced warning about such an event if it were going to occur. But as noted in the past, what were they thinking? They're not exactly great at this job just yet. There is a good chance they may miss a small or otherwise insignificant asteroid entering the atmosphere. That's not the only disaster that's made waves recently. There has been a viral video going around showing one of SpaceX's astronaut capsules exploding, and evidence has come forward that this video may actually be real, something neither SpaceX nor NASA has publicly admitted to. The memo obtained by the Orlando Sentinel reads, "As most of you are aware, SpaceX conducted a test fire of their crew capsule abort engines at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and they experienced an anomaly. Subsequently, the video of the failed test, which was not released by SpaceX or NASA, appeared on the internet. The email then goes on to tell employees that they are prohibited from recording any of the operational activities. It's possible that this is either state secret, company secret, or simply something that they are trying to develop and are still not happy with, and feel that bad publicity might be a negative feature for their stock price. But until either NASA or SpaceX come forward stating what has happened and why, we can only speculate. While SpaceX has been receiving some negative publicity recently, NASA has been investigating the supplier, and they found they were receiving faulty products for close on 20 years. At least 2 scientific missions have failed to launch due to a supplier who has been sending faulty aluminium for rocket parts. They were able to get away with it by creating fraudulent test results and accreditations. As a consequence, the Department of Justice has ordered Sapper Profiles Incorporated to pay back $46 million to NASA, the Department of Defense, and others it has defrauded. While NASA is being defrauded by one company, some of its older investments continue to produce. The 29-year-old Hubble telescope has just recently contributed yet more to us. These are images described by the team as a time corridor of the universe showing galaxies as they were up to 13.3 billion years ago. These were generated by Hubble when it stared at one spot in space for 10 days straight, and are called deep field images. What doesn't look like much initially are in fact hundreds if not thousands of other galaxies, so far into space that they would otherwise not have been visible to the naked eye. Astronomers have patched together a series of these deep field images to create the most comprehensive history book of galaxies in a single image. It required 16 years worth of observations from Hubble to be able to accomplish this. The project has been named the Hubble Legacy Field, and understandably so, given that Hubble increasingly looks like it will no longer continue to function in the near future. It has begun to show technical and stability problems. If that were not impressive enough, other astronomers have been able to improve upon that work. Scientists working at the Instituto de Astrofísica de Canarias, or the IAC, developed and applied an image processing technique that was able to draw out unseen light in the deep field images. Their technique is called BIS. Among the accomplishments that are coming from this are that some of the galaxies that were thought to be smaller are in fact twice the size than previously thought. In other and somewhat related news, it's possible that researchers have detected gravitational waves resulting from a black hole consuming a neutron star. It is thought that there is a 13% chance of this being the case, but scientists are hopeful that such is what has happened. There are many examples of binary star systems, such as the Crab Nebula, but we have yet to see evidence of a star system where there is a neutron star and a black hole, two stars that have gone different paths in the way they have collapsed. This structure is hypothetically possible, and as such, although we have yet to see it, is a possibility. In an article from The Conversation, a position was put forward that alien life is likely imminent and certainly inevitable. The article goes over not just the chemistry, but how life would go about and what evidence we currently have mounting. Such things as water on Mars, the adverse environments in which life exists on Earth, and current theories about where life on Earth might just have originated. While we are looking so very hard and so very earnestly for life on other planets, life on Earth, and particularly Scientologists, are working towards undoing life. A Scientology cruise ship with hundreds of passengers has been quarantined off the Caribbean island of St Lucia due to a case of measles. The cruise ship was for all intents and purposes a plague ship to the local population. The highly infectious virus could have easily spread throughout the inhabitants of the ship, and when the tourists entered on shore leave, could have exposed the locals to the same highly infectious virus, which means that even if they were not infected themselves, they may have been a carrier. Quarantine restrictions were implemented in an attempt to halt any potential spread. St Lucia can proudly state that they have not had an outbreak of measles since 1990. As was stated in the Hollywood Reporter, some of the most notable anti-vaxxers are Scientologists. It would stand to reason, then, that one of their ships was inevitably going to have one, if not more, cases of some avoidable disease on board. This is not the only instance of quarantine having been implemented in recent weeks. Going into the future, it is not likely to be the last. When you consider that it was in the 19th century that viable vaccines were developed, and how far we've moved from them since, that people continue to use pasteurization as the best option to keep milk fresh, it is surprising that we have not yet developed a better alternative, and at least one lab is claiming to have done just that. At the moment, pasteurization will keep milk fresh on a shelf in a fridge for between 2 and 3 weeks. Scientists working at an Australian company claim that they have a methodology that will keep milk fresh for more than 60 days, nearly a 2 to 3-fold improvement. As the company is currently trying to get both a patent for this and treat it as an industrial secret, they are not telling anyone just how they're doing it. However, their methodology has been approved and accepted by several state regulators. The hurdle was getting a process that was equivalent or better than pasteurization, and that appears to have been met, according to various agency officials. Finally, going back a ways in history, new evidence has come to light that the Nazis were unnervingly close to a nuclear program. The evidence consists of a tiny metal cube weighing about 2 kilograms that is in fact a piece of uranium taken from the reactor that Hitler tried to build. This was one of a number run by competing research teams. The one that came into possession of this particular researcher was never going to be a successful fissionable material, as the ratios and mixture of isotopes was incorrect. Despite this, the Nazis produced over 1,000 such cubes. In theory, if they had pulled these cubes and created a more pure product, they might have had a sort of fissionable material. However, they did not yet have the apparatus, nor did they ever attempt to put enough of these cubes in one reactor at one time to create a chain reaction. This would have prevented them from ever forming a functional nuclear reactor, let alone an atomic bomb. Thank you for watching this video. If you have found it interesting, consider liking, sharing, and subscribing. Please post any comments, questions, or suggestions below.